All right, let's talk Xfinity Series at Portland. Gonna probably be a pretty short video. Wow, I'm a negative Nancy. Brandon don't like road course racing. I believe this track would be very, very fun to race in real life, and like an Indy like Pro 2000, or on some open wheel vehicle. I think this would be a very fun track to learn and really hone your skills at. I.e., looking back at AJ Allmendinger's, gritting his teeth at this track back in the day. But stock cars here are really, really rough. These guys are going to have way more speed than brains at this track, and I would not be shocked to see a ton of people going off the track in the race. I personally have very, very little interest in the Xfinity Series race this weekend at Portland, just due to the fact that not only it's going to be the first time that a lot of these guys are going to get practice time at this track and then race here, I just don't think it's a track designed very well for very heavy high center of gravity vehicles. This is, like I said, I think an Indy Pro 2000 would be an absolute fantastic vehicle to race here, an open wheel car. But these stock cars are going to be pushing into every corner, and the first right-handed chicane right down the French straightaway is just dumb. But once you get through that, and once you start turning right and trying to get back on the back straightaway and stuff, those corners are so flat, and there's so little racing. The racing surface is so small. God help us if we get guys going side by side in any of these corners, because whoever's on the outside is going to be pushed off the track. That's just it, and then I wouldn't be shocked if we see guys, pushing hard, trying to pass, down the back straightaway, entering the left-handed corner, and ends up, shoving guys out of the way. This is just a track that this is a slate that I'm not very interested in. I just want to put that out there, and that's why it's the first one being recorded this week. It's going to be a really short one. I mean, we can talk about the salaries real quick, but I just think this is a terrible race to race at. I know the Truck Series ran there in '99 and 2000, and yeah, it wasn't that good. At least in my opinion, I don't think it was that enjoyable to watch. You can look back at the ARCA races and still like, hey, that's the ARCA race. Those guys are a bunch of idiots to begin with. But even the salaries here are showing that DraftKings is like, okay, we might have a situation where, we're going to price guys pretty softly, because there's a high chance that we have guys going off the track here. And this is a race to where, God, dude, it is ugly. I hate this race, man. I hate this slate. That's my main advice. I'm not afraid to say that. Same thing with Knoxville later this month. Said it last year. Disaster in Knoxville. Nobody watched the video, but I don't plan on playing much of Knoxville. I don't really plan on doing much here at Portland. I think AJ and Ty Gibbs are the two favorites to win the race, and it's backed up by the salaries. But even in that situation, I think place differential is going to be huge here. Just due to the fact that, and not even, I don't mean that in a sense of let's chase all the place differential, but I fully expect this race to get stupid late in the race, especially if we have a late race yellow. And shout out to colleague last year when we didn't have live pit stops, still getting penalties for being on pit road for not the designated time, for being under the mandated time. I just fully expect things to just become absolutely idiotic and moronic here at this track, and so I have very little interest. I wish I could go into this, but look, man, when we look back at the road course races that the Xfinity Series has gone through, sure, who's been consistent here, and it pushes back to AJ Allmendinger being consistent. AJ Allmendinger has experience at this track, not recently, but he's at least been there. I think that certainly gives him an edge. I wouldn't be shocked to see AJ Allmendinger be up there late in this race. Andy Lally's in this race. I think this is a race that leans really towards Andy Lally's driving style. However, it is Andy Lally. I understand that, he's been in a lot of races, and even looking back at some of his more recent finishes, he's been in underfunded cars. But Andy Lally, $8,100, I don't see Andy knocking down the race and finishing the top 10. And as I said, I think a lot of guys are going to get used up in these corners, and Andy would be a guy that I think are going to be used up. Typically whenever we have these road course guys in there, the regular, big dogs, the Xfinity series, just run them over. This is a racetrack where you don't have a lot of chances to give room. This isn't a situation where, like a Watkins Glen, of where, there's passing points and there's places to where you can let somebody by and give each other room. This is a racetrack to where 100% flat, and so not only do you have the vehicle one to just absolutely shove out of the corners, you have these guys that are just going to absolutely run each other over. I fully expect Sheldon Creed to get involved in a wreck this week. I fully expect, one of the bigger, JGR cars to run into some issues, either being pushed off the track. We see Alex LeBay run into issues at these races. He'll run up front and then late in the race it just gets used up. I'm telling you, the first right-handed little chicane right past the front straightaway is going to be stupid. And then anybody who survives that and who isn't, completely ran over there, enter the first real right-handed slow. All these corners are slow too. They're really long and slow corners, and that just doesn't perform well with these stock cars. And so, man, I'm really offering just a bunch of DFS picks here. But I wouldn't be shocked to end up, at least for me, playing a lot of place differential guys tied in with either Ty Gibbs or H. Allmendinger. I expect one of those guys to start first. I expect one of the guys to lead the race, and past that, I think it's just a race of survival. Guys that I don't necessarily want to play, or let's transition to guys who they got to go or go home. Jade Buford, a man who absolutely got railed for no reason out of his ride. Him and Scott form the team. They're like, all right, we want to do this together. They get in line with RCR, and very quickly, Jade Buford is just kicked out of the race car. The fact that we're going to have Dylan Reddick and all the other guys in this car up until, late in the year, and then Jade has to jump back in there, that's absolutely disastrous for Jade. And so this is a place where Jade has to make something happen here. A road course guy, a road course ringer, 7,300. Not ringer, for example, but that's where his experience comes from. 7,300, I think Jade Buford is a good play. Just due to the fact that his finishes can easily projected as either 8th or 32nd. I don't really see a reason why he would finish anywhere in between that. Like, this is one of his last shots. And not only, like, to get a ride, and it's not necessarily that, because he's going to be back in this car on and off next year as well. But when you lose those opportunities that you have, you're certainly going to take advantage and try and be there. And when we look at Jade's finishes, at the road courses, it's very similar to that. Or it's very similar to those types of projections, 36, 16th, 20th, 14th, 16th, 18th, 21st, 13th, 34th, 19th. And so I'm giving him the benefit of the doubt that he ends up running better, and, oddly enough, I hate using COTA as a real example, but this racetrack, when you get spread out, is going to race a lot like COTA. Once you get spread out, once you survive the early chaos and stuff, if you have car control, you're going to be able to get through the field. It's just surviving the initial restarts and certainly surviving the end of the race that I'm concerned about. But Jade's looking good at COTA. Same thing with Brett Moffatt. A.J. Allmendinger first and second, both races at COTA, but A.J. Allmendinger is pretty much a top 4 guaranteed driver here. Even in situations where it was last year, not at the Roval, not at the Glen, was it Mid-Ohio? One of the races last year, he had to go to the rear and drove up through the field late in the race to end up winning the race. And I hate using certain tracks over the others, certainly when it comes to road courses. But I would really look to COTA and Mid-Ohio being the 2 data points that we want to look at. Still, look at everything as a whole, but I think we're going to see guys be able to replicate what they've done at Mid-Ohio and COTA and show up. Those are the 2 data points I really look at. Past that, I really hate this slate, man. I could have made it shorter. Could have just said that. But we're 10 minutes in. Thank you for listening. But pump the brakes. Don't play a lot of Portland. I expect this race to get stupid at some point in this race. And yeah, thank you for watching, and thank you for checking out the Xfinity Series preview.